The First World War killed nearly 20 million people. It collapsed 4 empires, redrew the map of the world, and ended a century of European peace. But it did not begin as a catastrophe. It began as a series of decisions, taken by specific men, in specific rooms, on specific days. This is not a history of the war told through battles or treaties. It is a history told through 48 faces: emperors and chancellors, generals and assassins, chemists and pilots, dancers and revolutionaries. Each one made a choice that led to the next. Together, they made the 20th century. Since the 2nd of December 1848, Franz Joseph I has worn the crown of Austria-Hungary. By 1914, 66 years on the throne. He has buried a wife killed by an anarchist, a son lost to suicide, a brother shot in Mexico. His empire is a patchwork of a dozen nations, held together by nothing but his name. He rises at 4 in the morning and works at the same desk he used as a young man. The old man and his fading monarchy become the point at which every line of the coming catastrophe will meet. From his appointment in 1906, Franz Conrad von Hötzendorf, chief of the Austro-Hungarian General Staff, demanded preventive war against Serbia. In the single year of 1913, he made that demand formally 25 times. He is convinced that the Habsburg monarchy can survive only through war. Otherwise, the Slavic nationalisms inside will tear it apart. His memoranda pile on Franz Joseph's desk, cold calculations of a man for whom peace is only a delay of the inevitable. Since the 15th of June 1888, Kaiser Wilhelm II has ruled the German Empire, grandson of Queen Victoria, nephew of the British King, second cousin to the Russian Tsar. A withered left arm hidden under a glove. He builds a fleet to rival Britain, and on the 5th of July 1914, he hands Austria-Hungary a blank check of support against Serbia. His diplomacy is a series of sharp gestures and wounded telegrams. Europe watches him with irritation, not knowing that he is pushing the continent toward the edge. Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg, Chancellor of Germany since the 14th of July 1909, is more cautious than the Kaiser, but weaker than him. He understands that a two-front war will destroy Germany, and yet he sanctions the commitments that lead to exactly that. On the 7th of July 1914, speaking to his aide, he calls the move against Serbia a leap into the dark, but he does not stop it. A historian by nature, a politician by office, he will watch what he could have prevented collapse around him. Tsar Nicholas II has worn the crown of Russia since the 1st of November 1894, and he never wanted it. And he never wanted the war. A family man with a diary in which the weather mattered more than politics. Russia, weakened by defeat against Japan and by the Revolution of 1905, has not yet recovered, but obligations to France and the pan-Slavic idea pull him toward Serbia. On the 30th of July 1914, he will sign the order for general mobilization, not knowing that this forces Germany to strike first. His signature is the starting point. Raymond Poincaré, elected president of the French Republic on the 18th of February 1913, is a Lotharingian who grew up under German occupation in 1870. Revenge is not an idea for him, it is a biography. He has rebuilt French diplomacy, tightened the alliance with Russia, forced military readiness. In July 1914, he travels in person to St. Petersburg to reassure the Tsar of French support. The moment his ship leaves Kronstadt, Austria declares war on Serbia. The timing is not accidental. The continent is ready to break. King George V of the United Kingdom, on the throne since the 6th of May 1910, is first cousin to both Wilhelm and Nicholas. a constitutional monarch without real power, but with the symbolic weight of the crown. Britain is bound to France by the Entente Cordiale, and to Belgium by the Treaty of 1839 on neutrality. On the 4th of August 1914, when German boots crossed the Belgian frontier, George will sign a declaration of war against the man he used to call Dear Willie. The royal family of Europe ends with one stroke of the pen. Since the 18th of June, 1897, Alfred von Tirpitz, as Grand Admiral of the German Navy, has been building the High Seas Fleet for 20 years to challenge Britain's command of the waters. Every new dreadnought laid down in Kiel forced London to lay down two of its own. The naval arms race turned Britain from a possible partner into an inevitable enemy. Tirpitz's ships will barely leave port, but they have already made the war unavoidable. On the 28th of June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary arrives in Sarajevo. Heir to the throne, supporter of federalizing the monarchy, advocate of giving the Slavs equal rights with Austrians and Hungarians. The paradox: his death is needed by Serbian nationalists precisely because, alive, he could have taken away their reason to fight. He has come to Sarajevo reluctantly for the sake of his wife, whom the court denies honors. A bomb will miss the car, and then the chauffeur will turn down the wrong street. On the same morning of the 28th of June 1914, Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old member of Young Bosnia, waits on the pavement of Franz Joseph Street, a tubercular boy who failed the height requirement for the Serbian army. Too weak to fight, just resolved enough to kill. When the Archduke's car stops 5 paces away, he fires twice. One bullet strikes Franz Ferdinand. The second strikes his pregnant wife, Sophie. Princip will swallow cyanide that fails to work. Within a month, empires will begin delivering ultimatums to each other. Helmuth von Moltke the Younger, chief of the German General Staff since the 1st of January 1906, is the nephew of the great Moltke, the victor of 1871. On his shoulders rests the Schlieffen Plan: defeat France in 6 weeks through Belgium, then turn east against Russia. He weakens the right wing, shifts forces, loses his nerve. In September, the German advance halts at the Marne. Moltke reports to the Kaiser, "Your Majesty, we have lost the war." On the 14th of September, he is relieved of command. There will be no blitzkrieg. Joseph Joffre, commander-in-chief of the French army since the 28th of July 1911, is calm, heavy-set, methodical. When the Germans break through, he does not panic and he does not explain. On the 5th of September 1914, he requisitions the Parisian taxis, redirects troops to the Marne, and stops an offensive that had seemed unstoppable. The miracle on the Marne becomes the first failure of the German machine. The war shifts from movement to trenches. The first line of trenches is being dug in the west, and it will go on being dug for 4 more years. On the 19th of December 1915, Douglas Haig takes over the British Expeditionary Force, a Scotsman, a cavalryman, a man of deep faith in the offensive. The British Army, small, professional, has melted away in months of fighting. Haig will build a new one, conscripted, in millions of bayonets. He believes one decisive attack will break the Germans. On the 1st of July 1916, he will throw it onto the Somme, and in a single day will lose almost 60,000 men killed and wounded. Victory will retreat by another 2 years. On the 22nd of August 1914, Paul von Hindenburg is recalled from retirement, 67 years old, living on his pension, because the Kaiser needs a name people will believe when Russian armies invade East Prussia. They put him on a train at Tannenberg between the 26th and 30th of August, Samsonov's army is encircled and destroyed. In the early hours of August the 30th, Samsonov slips into the forest near Willenberg and shoots himself. Hindenburg becomes a national hero, a face, a name, a monument. The real command is taken by his chief of staff. On the same day, the 22nd of August 1914, Erich Ludendorff becomes chief of staff to Hindenburg, son of a ruined landowner with no von before his name, no aristocratic career. He is the brain of the duo. Tannenberg was planned by him. By August 1916, he and Hindenburg will hold de facto power over Germany, military, economic, food supply. He will impose total mobilization of industry and forced labor. Germany turns into a military dictatorship wrapped in the cover of a constitutional monarchy. Enver Pasha, appointed Ottoman Minister of War on the 3rd of January 1914, is young, vain, infatuated with Germany. He drags Turkey into the war on the side of the Central Powers, counting on a revival of empire and a pan-Turkic revenge. His Caucasus offensive in the winter of 1914-1915 in the mountains of Sarakamush ends in catastrophe. Tens of thousands of soldiers freeze to death. He returns to Constantinople with his prestige shaken, his strategy in ruins, and a war that will outlast his career. Mehmed V, Sultan and Caliph of the Ottoman Empire since the 27th of April 1909, had spent 30 years before that under house arrest under his brother. He came to the throne an old man, without power and without will. Enver and the Young Turks rule in his name. On the 14th of November 1914, he issues a fatwa declaring jihad against the Entente, calling Muslims worldwide to war against the British, French, Russians. Almost no one answers. The Ottoman Empire enters a war in which disintegration awaits it. On the 25th of April 1915, Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal commands the Ottoman defense of a key ridge at Gallipoli when the British and Australians land on the peninsula to seize the straits and knock Turkey out of the war. "I am not ordering you to attack. I am ordering you to die," he tells his regiment. They die, but they hold the line. The 8-month Entente landing fails. Kemal's name becomes known, for now only inside Turkey. Erich von Falkenhayn, who replaced Moltke as chief of the German General Staff on the 14th of September 1914, understands there can be no breakthrough in the West. So he formulates another strategy. Choose a place the French will defend at any cost and bleed them there. The place becomes Verdun, a symbol, a fortress, a point of national pride. On the 21st of February 1916, the offensive begins. The plan is not to take, but to destroy. By the end of the year, about 700,000 men on both sides will be killed or wounded at Verdun. On the 25th of February 1916, Philippe Pétain takes command of the French defense at Verdun, a 60-year-old general who despised the cult of the offensive. He introduces a rotation. Every division passes through hell and is relieved. Down the sacred way, he endlessly funnels supplies and men. "They shall not pass." The phrase is attributed to him. They did not pass. Pétain will save France in 1916, and 24 years later, he will sign her surrender to Hitler. On the 4th of June 1916, while the Allies bleed at the Somme and Verdun, Alexei Brusilov, commander of the Russian Southwestern Front, delivers a blow that will change ideas about modern war. No prolonged artillery preparation, offensive across the whole front at once, breakthroughs at several points simultaneously. The Austro-Hungarian army loses about 1.5 million men, including 400,000 taken prisoner. It is the last great success of the Russian army, and the blow from which Austria-Hungary, as a military force, will never recover. On the 22nd of April 1915, at Ypres, the German chemist Fritz Haber, the man who before the war had taught humanity how to draw ammonia from air, a discovery that would feed billions, personally directs the release of chlorine from nearly 6,000 cylinders onto the French lines. Thousands of soldiers suffocate. A week later, his wife, herself a chemist, will shoot herself in the garden with his service pistol. The next morning, Haber leaves for the Eastern Front to continue his work. On the 17th of September 1916, Manfred von Richthofen scores his first confirmed aerial victory. A son of a Prussian baron, a cavalryman disillusioned by the mud of the trenches. He is transferred to aviation. In early 1917, he will paint his albatross red, hence the Red Baron. 80 enemy aircraft shot down, a nightly tally inside an industrial slaughter. On the 21st of April 1918, he will be killed by a single bullet above the Somme, whose bullet is still argued today. The age of individual heroism ends with him. On the 21st of July 1917, Alexander Kerensky becomes head of the Russian Provisional Government, a lawyer, an orator, a man of gestures in a country where the February Revolution has already swept away the Romanov dynasty. He decides to continue the war to victory, calculating that free Russia will fight better than the Tsars. The June offensive collapses in a week. The army begins to disintegrate. Desertion becomes mass-scale. The rear is starving. Kerensky sits in an emptying cabinet, not understanding that the country no longer hears his words. On the 16th of April 1917, Vladimir Lenin returns to Russia. Germany sees in the Bolshevik leader a weapon and lets him pass through its territory in a sealed train from Switzerland to Petrograd. The calculation is simple. Lenin will take Russia out of the war. On the 7th of November, the Bolsheviks take Petrograd almost without resistance. The slogan is "Peace, Land, Bread." Within months at Brest-Litovsk, Russia will sign a separate peace, paying for it with Ukraine, the Baltic, Finland. In the negotiations at Brest-Litovsk that drag from December 1917 into March 1918, Leon Trotsky, People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs, faces Germans who demand vast territories. His formula is neither peace nor war, dissolve the army, sign no treaty. The Germans resume the offensive and, in a week, advance deeper than in the previous 3 years. On the 3rd of March 1918, the Bolsheviks are forced to sign whatever is dictated to them. The Eastern Front disappears. Germany transfers 1 million soldiers to the West. Woodrow Wilson, who took office as President of the United States on the 4th of March 1913, was re-elected in 1916 under the slogan, "He kept us out of war." But Germany begins unrestricted submarine warfare, sinks the Lusitania and neutral ships, and the British intercept the Zimmermann telegram, offering Mexico an alliance against the United States. On the 6th of April 1917, Wilson asks Congress to declare war. He does not want territories and indemnities. He wants a new world order. His 14 points will become the map of the post-war world. On the 26th of May, 1917, John Pershing is appointed commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, a career officer who has served in Cuba, the Philippines, on the Mexican border. The Allies demand that American regiments be fed into their bled-out divisions. Pershing refuses. The American Army will fight as an American army. By the summer of 1918, it is shipping 200,000 soldiers a month into France. Germany sees this flood and understands the window for victory is closing. On the 15th of October 1917, at dawn, Mata Hari is shot at the execution post of Vincennes, a Dutch woman with a Javanese stage name, lover to officers on both sides. French counterintelligence has accused her of spying for Germany. The evidence is weak, the trial is short, the verdict is foregone. A century later, declassified files will show she did no serious damage. But in a rear gripped by paranoia and exhaustion, a symbol was needed: foreign, female, guilty. In May 1917, Maria Bochkareva founds the Women's Battalion of Death, a peasant woman who had passed through the front as a private soldier with the Tsar's special permission. In the summer of 1917, when the male army is falling apart, Kerensky allows the formation of women's units, a propaganda gesture of desperation. Her battalion attacks at Smorgon, takes losses. In October, her women guard the Winter Palace on the night of the storming. She will survive the revolution, emigrate, return, and in 1920, the Bolsheviks will execute her. The time of volunteers is over. On the 26th of March, 1918, Ferdinand Foch becomes Supreme Commander of the Allied forces, just as Ludendorff begins the last German offensive. The Allies finally need a single command. Foch receives it. The Germans are attacking along the whole front. Then we must counterattack along the whole front. In summer, he stops the Germans on the Marne. In autumn, he drives them back. In the forest of Compiègne, in his staff carriage, the armistice is signed on the 11th of November, 1918. The war ends in his railway car. On the 7th of December, 1916, David Lloyd George replaces the ineffective Asquith as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, son of a Welsh shoemaker, a radical liberal, master of the rear at war. He created the Ministry of Munitions, imposed conscription, ordered convoys against the U-boats, and bent the surviving admirals to his will. He carries Britain to victory. At Versailles, he will balance between a vengeful Clemenceau and an idealist Wilson. The British Empire will leave the war larger than it entered it, and mortally tired. On the 21st of November 1916, Karl I inherits the throne of Austria-Hungary from Franz Joseph, young, devout, sincerely seeking peace. In early 1917, he secretly negotiates with the Entente through his wife Zita's brother, Sixtus of Bourbon-Parma, an officer in the Belgian army. In spring 1918, Clemenceau publishes the correspondence. Allied Germany humiliates and subordinates Karl. By autumn, his empire falls apart. Czechs, Poles, Hungarians, South Slavs declare independence one after another. On the 11th of November 1918, Karl renounces participation in state affairs without abdicating. Reinhard Scheer has commanded the German High Seas Fleet since the 18th of January 1916, and that same fleet of Tirpitz, for whose sake Britain became an enemy, has lain in port for almost the whole war. In May 1916, at Jutland, Scheer fights the only great battle. The British lose more, but keep the blockade. On the 24th of October 1918, Scheer orders the fleet out for a suicidal last battle for honor. The sailors refuse. The mutiny at Kiel spreads through the whole country. The German Revolution begins at sea. At Brest-Litovsk in December 1917, the real negotiations are led not by Hindenburg or Ludendorff, but by Max Hoffmann, the brain of the German Eastern Front. He planned Tannenberg. Credit went to Hindenburg. Now he speaks to the Bolsheviks from the position of a victor. After the war, he will write his memoirs, removing the halo from the Hindenburg-Ludendorff duo and showing who actually made the decisions. Historians will hear him too late. The myth proves more durable than the facts. On the 18th of September 1918, the stormtrooper Lieutenant Ernst Junger receives the Pour le Mérite. By then, he has spent more than 3 years in the trenches, wounded 14 times. After the war, he will write Storm of Steel, without pity, without moral, without the usual horror. For him, war is a higher test in which a man meets himself. The book will be read both by pacifists and by future fascists, each finding their own in it. Junger becomes the voice of the lost generation returning from the front. Albert I, King of the Belgians since the 23rd of December 1909, refuses in August 1914 to let German troops cross his country and personally takes command of its army. Belgium is crushed in weeks, but does not capitulate. The king spends 4 years with his soldiers on a narrow strip of unoccupied territory behind the Yser. On the 22nd of November 1918, he leads his troops in person into liberated Brussels. For a small country that became a symbol of resistance, he will remain the King Knight. On the 3rd of October 1918, Emir Faisal, leader of the Arab Revolt, rides into Damascus at the head of his Bedouin columns. The British have promised the Arabs an independent state from Syria to Arabia in exchange for revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Faisal has led camel detachments through the desert, cut Turkish railways, taken city after city. Meanwhile, Britain and France have already divided the Arab lands by the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement of May 1916. The promised kingdom Faisal will not receive. The seed of the Middle Eastern crisis is sown in the days of victory. From October 1916, Thomas Lawrence serves as British liaison officer to the Arab Revolt, an archaeologist, an Orientalist, fluent in Arabic. He merges with Faisal's cause and learns of Sykes-Picot before most British politicians do. He will plead with London to honor its promises to the Arabs and not be heard. After the war, he will refuse honors, change his name, hide in the Royal Air Force as a private. His 7 Pillars of Wisdom will become one of the most ambiguous books of the century, a victor ashamed of his victory. In June 1917, Jan Smuts, a South African general, takes a seat in the Imperial War Cabinet in London. A Boer who fought against the British in 1899 now fights alongside them in East Africa, in Palestine, in Whitehall. He is among those who turned the British Empire into an empire commonwealth with its own voice for the dominions. At Versailles, he will be one of the architects of the League of Nations. The idea of mandates, administering former German and Ottoman territories, is also formulated by him. From 1919, Henry Cabot Lodge, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, obstructs the ratification of the Treaty of Versailles and the League of Nations, not from isolationism, but from rejection of the clause on collective security, which, he believes, commits America to war without its consent. Wilson refuses compromise and tours the country to campaign until a stroke fells him. On the 19th of March 1920, the Senate finally rejects the treaty. The United States will never join the League of Nations they themselves created. On the 1st of February 1922, Walter Rathenau becomes Foreign Minister of the Weimar Republic, an industrialist, philosopher, Jew, who during the war ran the Office of Military Raw Materials, without whom the German war economy would not have lasted a year. On the 16th of April, he signs the Treaty of Rapallo with Soviet Russia, the two pariahs of the New Order. On the 24th of June, he's shot in an open car on the way to the ministry. The killers are nationalists who saw in him a Jew who sold Germany. The Weimar Republic loses one of its few supports. Victor Emmanuel III, King of Italy since the 29th of July 1900, has led a country that entered the war on the side of the Entente and lost about 600,000 men for less than what was promised. Post-war Italy is strikes, inflation, fear of revolution. On the 28th of October 1922, Mussolini and his black shirts march on Rome. The king refuses to declare martial law and hands him power. Parliamentary Italy ends that day. The first fascist regime in Europe was born out of the war. On the 9th of July 1926, Chiang Kai-shek launches the Northern Expedition as leader of the Kuomintang, in a China that had sent 140,000 laborers to France during the war and received nothing for it at Versailles. The former German concessions in Shandong went not to China, but to Japan. This sparked the May 4th movement of 1919. Versailles injustice gave birth to modern Chinese nationalism and to the confrontation with Japan that will erupt in the 30s. On the 29th of October 1923, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk proclaims the Turkish Republic from the Grand National Assembly in Ankara, the same officer who had held Gallipoli. The Treaty of Sèvres of 1920 carved up the Ottoman Empire. Kemal refused to accept it. He defeated the Greeks at Sakarya, expelled the occupying forces, and in 1923 signed the Treaty of Lausanne, the only revision of the Versailles system by force. He abolishes the caliphate, Latinizes the alphabet. From the wreckage of an empire, he builds a secular nation-state. On the 4th of October 1918, the German submarine officer Karl Dönitz falls into British captivity when his boat, UB-68, is attacked in the Mediterranean. In captivity, by his own account, he works out how submarine warfare should be conducted in the future. The idea: wolf packs, coordinated attacks on convoys. When, 2 decades later, Germany again launches unrestricted submarine warfare, he will command it. The lessons of one war became the weapon of the next. On the 10th of November 1918, Wilhelm II flees to the neutral Netherlands after Chancellor Max von Baden announces his abdication without his consent. He signs the formal act in Amerongen on the 28th of November. The Entente demands trial. The Dutch refuse. He will live at Doorn for 22 years, chopping wood and writing memoirs. On the 4th of June 1941, he dies in the German-occupied Netherlands, having seen the new Germany launch the war he called a revenge for his own. The age of Royal Europe ends quietly in a foreign country. On the 26th of April 1925, the Germans elect the 77-year-old Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg as President of the Weimar Republic. They need a symbol of a vanished age. He understands little of parliamentary politics. On the 30th of January 1933, yielding to pressure from his circle, he appoints the leader of the NSDAP as Chancellor. A year and a half later, Hindenburg dies. Hitler unites the offices of President and Chancellor. The old hero of Tannenberg becomes the last stone that opened the door. In June 1914, none of these men believed they were starting a world war. Each thought he was making a rational decision within his own responsibility. The Kaiser believed his blank check would deter Russia. The Tsar believed his mobilization would prevent invasion. The Chancellor believed the leap into the dark would close before it opened. Every one of them was wrong, not because they were stupid or evil, but because the system they served had grown too complex for any single man to control. The decisions that ended their world were not loud. They were ordinary: signatures, telegrams, phrases muttered to an aide. The catastrophe did not arrive. It accumulated. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing to follow more. Leave a like if it was worth your time. And in the comments below, tell us which figure, which era Which silence of history you would like us to listen to next?